Hello, welcome to Soma Stories, a podcast vessel for inquiry around the body, hosted by me, Charmaine. Each episode gathers and weaves various perspectives around a related issue. Our hope is that this podcast will be a space for the practice of listening, an opening of head space, and a regrounding of self. This third episode is devoted to the physicality of the body, the flesh, exhaustion, the labor, the extreme, immediate, and temporal nature of the body. I speak with Pat Toh, Sonia Kwek, and Michael Lee, all of whom have found themselves in a visceral relationship to their bodies. First up is Pat. Pat creates powerful performances that often push the body's limitations.
My name is Pat, and I call myself a body-based artist. My resource and my research and my concern is always dealing with the body, like its shifts or its limitations and its boundaries, which are created by social constructs and economic anxieties, and and how my lived experience shaped this always transforming medium. So that's why I work with the body as a resource, because it's so immediate. And in its immediacy, I just feel like, wow, that's like the most contemporary, immediate tool I have as an artist. Yeah, it's interesting to think about labor, because I think that the idea of labor can be perceived in so many layers of the body, right? Whether it's something that's very physical and tactile and sweaty and muscular, or sometimes it's also just the mental concentration and the mental stress. And so even if I'm to reflect like how physically laborious is my daily life, or in the way of my jobs for self-sustenance, or even my practice, like where is the effort and the physical labor in these ongoings of a day. There's always need to keep going. If you're not moving, you are not useful, and you are not, you're just all this, you are not. And then, so I think it's this kind of mentality that I feel is also driving the drive, and that drive becomes the exhaustion.
I asked Pat about how she first discovered making artistic work from a body-based perspective.
I just finished drama school, and I was very frustrated by the type of the training and its methodology, and how it's we did a lot of voice and text work, but they were mainly to feed the psychological delivery and storytelling. So from there, I just feel very detached, like, oh, how come performing and acting is just all in my head, and it's all around my speech muscles, and even the body and its training, it's to feed this narrative, this grand narrative. So I was kind of looking for a topic for myself if I'm to create my own work, and what kind of methodology will I use, and what kind of aesthetics will I bring in. And so I was really looking at my immediate surrounding, because I really feel like I was very interested in the everyday life, the pedestrian. I think it's also very much influenced from like the postmodern dance, where they were just looking at using away from like the virtuosic and just like everyday pedestrian movement. And so I was like, okay, since I like this type of work, so what is in my daily surrounding? And I think sports is something that I always gravitate towards. Like it's a I think from childhood, it's always a space of escape. It's like swimming, right? It's like, oh, you just jump in and I just swam. And so for me, sports and movement have this sense of ease and pleasure to it. I mean, topography or breath kind of bounced off from boxing gym in terms of the essence of its lines and the kind of sound that I hear in the gym. I experience psychophysical training and more type of like, it wasn't Buto exactly, but the artists that I was working with were influenced by Buto. Similarly, like working with physical gestures in one or two projects. And so I think it's quite, for me, I'm also quite hesitant sometimes to name different school of thoughts because I feel like I just encountered them for like two production. So I wouldn't dare to say I'm like, yeah, I'm a practitioner of Gutowski and I can do like psychophysical gestures and I use Buto, you know. But I'll just say that these were more like encounters I had and that kind of got into my nervous system. When it comes to making my own work, I looked away from acting books and just wanted to look at how they train in the gym. Like I think the kind of but it's useful to encounter Laban as well. Like so I think for me that was the most exciting subject. And I think it's quite commonly used in many acting school. And I think it's one of the postmodern dance vocabulary where he was like dissect. I think he came up with this aerobic workout type of system. And so he broke down the body into very fundamental units. So for me, that became something I was like, oh, I can apply this and look at my daily activities into some kind of compositional structure. And yeah, so that was how I addressed the lack, I guess, from what I recalled when I experienced different directors and what remained in my body and what I read and what I get excited about. Because I really admire some, like even like Wim Hof, right? Or even David Blaine, or even like people who are just breaking records in free diving, for instance. Like I'm very curious about the state of apnea like in free diving. That's something I have been spending my time with. That quietness and that slowing down. And also because I think in the water, it triggers a mammalian dive reflux, which for me, this physical state is quite, it's really a survival instinct, right? It cools your body down so that you can actually survive better in the water. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. It's survival skill. And our body instinctively, physiologically just does it when your face is submerged in the water because your temperature just cool down. And I find the idea of this as survival, like body's instinct to survive, really interesting. Because maybe my idea of survival is, wow, must chong ah, you know? Better do it faster and just don't die and just keep going. So for me, that sense of floating your way and that sense of trust actually is like, okay, you know, you're being looked after and you can just relax because it's so important to drop your weight, drop all tension. I never really allow that kind of trust, that kind of like release, and that kind of just, and you only have that one breath. And I have to assure myself there's oxygen and you are safe. How do I rest? I rest by moving even more. Oh my gosh. Like my gym is my rest. So I feel like, yeah, my going for classes is my rest. So I actually don't really dare to give myself a rest. Oh my gosh, it's like a therapy session. It's like, oh, I don't dare to rest. Yeah, but I do sleep. I do meditate. And dance is a kind of rest for me. It's so interesting. Like, even if it's just putting a very a very silly video and just copying people popping. Like, it's so funny. Like, I find it so gigglish. And so it's funny and it's fun. And or even just like sensing the body and moving, like free movement and meditative type of attentive movement for me in my room is rest. Like, yeah, it's actually very restful because then I'm very like appreciative of like, okay, this is my weight, this is where I am, and I'm opening up and I'm also reflecting the space. So I think that kind of yeah, attention is very joyful. I do vipassana and I love it how it's like an internal body scan. And I feel like it's a peep into something that I can't see. And I find it very um very consoling, like very comforting. It's kind of like you can't see it, but you can feel it. And for me, I also practice this Amrita movement. I mean, it's a teacher that I really that really opened my sensibility to movement in stillness. He's Pat Toh, and he's actually based in Solo. I mean, he's passed on, but I spent a few months with him. There was one moment I recall where we were in the garden and there were like not many people there, and I was like the only person, and I was getting really bored. I was like, "Aya, die, do lah." And then he's like, oh, "Okay," and I was just like thinking to myself, "Okay, what if I just squat at the bush of plants and just see, like I run out of ideas." And then he's like, oh, "Okay, very good. You can just in the pause, it's like a junction. You can decide where to go." So I was like, "Wow, okay." And I was kind of giggling in my head. I was like, "Ha ha ha." I was just anyhow like squat. But I think that kind of practice was because just helped me be more comfortable with um, stopping, and how the stopping is also very alive with decision making and yeah, observing. So I'm quite inspired by him because he came from, I mean, there is traditional dance influences in Indonesia, but he also investigated himself by looking at Vipassana at Sumarang, which is kind of an Indonesian meditation technique, which is about just let it be, just very ease, like, okay, this is a situation type of vibe. And his own going to temples and sites of nature to just like understand and create his own movement philosophy from these. So I find it, I mean, it's always inspiring to read how people just create their own system out of their own, like question and dissatisfaction. So I carry his practice quite a bit in my restful, in my rest. And I think he'll be very glad because I think he made me think about how um, the performativity of everyday lives. Like, he talked a lot about different types of stage. Like, I think it's also quite prevalent in maybe Indonesian culture, right? Like, even ritual, the idea of prayer and performance is so much a part of ritual, and ritual being such a big part of their daily lives. So he sees all these daily life as stage. So even from the pondopo, which is like a very public space, like a shelter, and to the marketplace or the dining space. And that made me think about, oh yeah, the performativity of this, like even how I am in my classroom or how I am eating my meal. So then that makes me think about, I mean, yeah, one, performativity of the body and using that as an aesthetic question and challenge, but also in how I, yeah, just choose to dial up the performativity or just dial it down and just know that my body is already performing. I mean, it's such a powerful machine, right? Even in its breathing and its digestion and all that. So I think, yeah, that gives me that kind of very, I think that's how I feel the body becomes such an immediate resource into my movement work, as well as into just the being of every day, and learning to rest in that, in its, yeah, and how powerful it is. It's like it's already so strong.
The body as a machine. In the next section, I explore how this is even more sharply in focus in today's labour economy. I speak with artist Michael Lee, who worked as a Grab delivery worker during the pandemic.
Hi, my name is Michael Lee. I'm an artist, curator, and educator. That's what you see in that order in my bio. But I also do some food delivery. So, although I started food delivery during end May 2020, that's when we were advised to stay home. Yeah, mask wearing was like the norm. The fact that I would be wearing a mask working made it a bit easier for me to actually get into it. Which is to say, I was actually quite concerned about being recognized, actually. And actually, when I went into the work proper, after a week, actually, I didn't care anymore because it was like so enjoyable. In food delivery, the more advanced your mode, the more money potentially you will be making. If you are driving, you could be making 20K. The most popular or in-demand mode would be motorcyclists because they are able to travel all around Singapore. But basically, cyclists potentially earn more than walkers because they can travel further and they can move faster. They can move goods at a faster pace. I would walk 5 days a week, 14-hour days. And as a walker, I could bring home 2.5K. But if I cycled, it could be at least 3K. Yeah, the body complained in specific sequence, you know. First, it would be the ankle, right? So that happened during the first 3 days. And then when I had a enough rest, the pain goes elsewhere. Sometimes if I forget to distribute my weight, my knee would go sore a little bit. But I would say, by and large, my body became conditioned by the second week, and I was good to go every day.
I ask him about the precarity of delivery work, its use of the algorithm, and its dependency on able bodies.
Each role, each job has its own kind of privilege and precarity. I would say that among the food delivery personnel I talk to on a daily basis, I would be slightly more privileged than those who are doing it full time, in the sense that they have nothing else to fall back on or no savings. It pains me to see a lady who is pregnant and in green uniform waiting for her orders. It really pains me. For me, I'm slightly more privileged because I was still having my adjunct teaching as my baseline. So any earning from food delivery was the bonus in that sense. So everything is run by the algorithm, and yet the algorithm can sometimes be unfair or unfeeling. So just off my head, I can think of like trying to claim for big orders. So apparently, if you receive a big order, like let's say 5 large packets from McDonald's, as long as you can take a photograph of everything and send to the system, potentially you can get a bonus of $8 from Grab, right? But sometimes the the system cannot recognize that the photographs is showing that big order and it says, sorry, no. If you're determined enough, you have to go and call up a human and, just make sure that happens. And that having to call up the helpline in order to get that bonus that you should rightfully deserve actually eats into your working time and your income. There is a clear difference between manual labor that is remunerated on a per job basis or hourly basis, as opposed to, doing something, let's say writing a review and being paid an honorarium. There's a clear difference. The thing about prestige, I feel, or that I learned over the years, is that it's not for everyone, or it's not for, at least it's not for me on every occasion. Recognizing that actually I really don't have that reserves that allows me to do prestige work makes me become more accepting of my limitation and make me more aware of how I like to live and work. The good thing about an algorithm is that you don't need somebody to be there to approve things, right? It's kind of automatic. And that's the thing, one of the key things with blockchain as well, right? Which is like, as soon as certain conditions are met, the next step is triggered. The pros of the food delivery app is that it's kind of blind, right? It doesn't care whether you have certain character flaw or whatever. It's just a carrier of information, including job opportunities. So it throws these job opportunities out, right? And of course, if you set your delivery app on auto accept mode, then it will be accepting without you knowing. And there, of course, some people who do not want to set themselves on that mode so that they can choose. So it's actually quite democratic in that sense. So the fact that it is very faceless and emotionless has this advantage of overcoming prejudice that could be based on gut feeling or based on looks, But yeah, I mean, the company would try to have a human voice, and on the other hand, on the helpline, yeah, sometimes they can be as faceless as the machine, and they may not even understand. And so this is what I mean by, like, when you're in different situations, it's very hard for empathy to happen. When your stress is about answering helpline calls from delivery personnel who are in distress, right? Who are lost or cannot find this place and that. That is your stress. And so maybe all you could do is to offer one of the prepared answers, right? But the person on the ground could be losing a job, could have met with an accident, whatever. Although this algorithm in the food delivery app that I use is not perfect, I feel that there is some of the working systems and reflects principles that are quite good in addressing prejudices that happens in a social setting, social physical setting. Yeah. So, for example, there are people who don't function well in an organizational setting, and it could be a personality thing, or it could be a medical condition, right? And of course, right now there are more and more organizations that are open to hiring people with special needs, even overcoming prejudice that could be based on gut feeling or based on looks. The job is broken down into quite simple and discrete steps that potentially, even if you're not the social type, or you're on the spectrum, or you are handicapped, physically handicapped, it's possible for you. So it's quite liberating, right? I know there are people who deliver using assistive vehicle. There are really senior folks, right? White hair and all that, who just manage, do what they can, right? Just do like, let's say, 10 jobs for the week, or just do enough to get the first level of incentive. Yeah. And because of that, I think this job is actually quite addresses equity in a not very obvious way, actually.
I had never really considered how the anonymity of the algorithm could also protect in some ways. It reminded me of how difficult it is to build a space where people can both feel seen and be seen. Lastly, I speak to Sonia Kwek, who works as a performance maker, a live model, and practices pole dance. We talk about this most immediate home that we inhabit.
My name is Sonia. I work across the arts, creative, and sometimes social sectors. I have interest in making art, and usually my work revolves around performance and the body. And I am very enamored with what the body can be, can represent, and the possibilities it holds. And usually I use it as a starting point for my explorations or investigations. Yeah, both in the very literal body as material, as a tool, but also the more, maybe what do you call it, metaphysical or explorations of the body in terms of what it represents as a concept or as a way of making sense of our place in the world. Whoa. I can't believe I said that. Oh, and like I work as a performer, as a live model, and as sometimes a teacher, facilitator. I also do pole dancing as a hobby, and I just started bouldering recently. So I think I have a personal interest in doing more body-based kind of hobbies where there is some kind of physical exertion of the body. What I'm interested in is mainly to do with the body as archive, the body as interface, the body as material, both in a very tangible material sense, but also in terms of intangible, emotional, historical, memory, that kind of material. And also very felt sensations, vibrations, that kind of thing, as pathways to understanding or making sense of the world. Reading Audre Lorde's The Uses of the Erotic was very powerful for me. Her whole body of essays in her book, Sister Outsider, I think that's was literally a life transforming book, that kind of thing for me. She had said like how like something that's always been used and named against you, you can actually own it, and actually you've always had it, and it's about coming into yourself, coming into your power. I think that's what to me is what it means to be erotic. Like when you can know your desires and own your desires and like, assert yourself in yourself without feeling like you're playing up to a certain standard or certain gaze or a certain what do you call that, pressure from other people. There is a term I also learned from Rizma and Putra from when I performed with Nada once, and I remember like Rizma had said like syok sendiri, which is like shook yourself in like when we were preparing the performance in terms of the choreography. And for me, the idea of syok sendiri is also something that I also after that learned from Hashima from Prisma, which is a company that dance company that I'm an associate artist with, that also has been life transforming for me. And anyway, Syok Sendiri, there's something about it that is linked to the idea of what Hashima also says, like it's self-soothing. And I think that to me is also powerful. in terms of how it links to eroticism, because you know how to soothe yourself, you know how to take care of yourself, you know what you need. Just this recent 2 years of pandemic, when I felt this sense of disheartedness. I remember when in Singapore, when suddenly all the places that are important to me, arts institutions, not all, but many, had suddenly had their space taken away from them. Or not taken away, but that's also like, I refuse to want to also believe that narrative. But the idea of suddenly their spaces, they have to vacate. Because it was like suddenly does this country have space for people who just want to make work that is not about a certain social political agenda or like if your work doesn't fit into making sense on paper for certain grant bodies, then suddenly it's like you cannot make sense to exist in this place, in this city we live in. And for me, I guess when you talk about like resistance, that made me feel a certain way in my body, to feel like, well, then because these are the places where I felt the kind of work that I make grew or had a chance to be featured in. And then suddenly, these are the only places I would contemplate going to them. I'm like, then where does our work sit? But then I think the other thing that I find very powerful, and why I feel that the body is still so powerful nowadays, because you are the only person who can inhabit this particular body you have at this moment of time in this place. Nobody else is going to have it. They can do things to your body. They can make the space you live in, you have to find ways to exist, blah, blah, blah. But they cannot actually like take away your own inhabitation of your body. So every time you do something that allows you to inhabit your body more fully, you are coming into your power more. And that is something that to me is still the most radical act at the end of the day, like anytime you do something small, even if it's like you wake up that morning and you stretch just because you give yourself like 2 minutes, 1 minute to stretch a little bit more, you took that time for yourself, right? Compared to like just rushing to the rest of your day. Yeah. And sometimes it's not always victorious. Sometimes it's also a moment of pain. Like if you also feel like that day you allow yourself to rest a little bit or to feel the weight of that pain as well. It's not always easy, but the moment that you allow yourself to feel your body, to not resist the body, what your body's trying to give you, the information, the moment you even try to attempt to have conversation with your body a little bit, just feel it, just like, hey, I'm here as well. Like, I think that's already powerful. Yeah. Anytime you do that, it's powerful, and that's resistance, right, for everybody. Yeah, I guess.
To come into one's own through our most immediate vessel can be a struggle in a society that makes other demands.
But because we live in a capitalist society and we need to survive, then that's the part where you do feel a bit, like, sometimes when like, money, right? Like, I mean, this question, I think when you ask it, probably you're also thinking, yeah, because blue collar jobs are always paid so much less, right? They're correct. Blue collar is I mean, like, look at construction workers, look at F&B workers in Singapore, look at, all the service, hospitality-oriented jobs, and all the construction jobs in Singapore. They suck. The pay sucks. We all know like sex workers here who literally are the most body worker work to me, if you ask me. There's always, stigma, shame beyond that. But if you think about it, they use their body so much. There's always a certain type of precarity linked to this kind of jobs. When I say this kind, I mean basically just jobs that are not working in a full-time institution. And when I say this kind, I mean jobs who require a certain use of the body. Yeah. And I wish it wasn't the case. I don't know when or how society will be able to change the way they view it. We are a country that outsources domestic labor a lot. You know, any things to do with domesticity. I mean, I was raised by a helper, you know, and I'm not unique in that way because a lot of people do that. And I guess that shows the attitude we have that in our country, maybe not just our country, but certain societies like ours, that somehow they have outsourced certain kind of body labor to get higher wages for working outside or something. Certain economics and politics of how things are run are quite entrenched in certain systems, so that bleeds down like this. But when you do body work, you also use your body intelligence. That's also that's brain work in a different way. But you know, it's like the typical thing where I don't know, like somehow jobs that on paper appear to use your brain a lot will ensure a higher return than you using your body. Maybe that's the price that they pay because they have to give up using their body. So they have to be tethered to a job, to a table. Maybe they're paying you so much because they know that later on you need to go and get physiotherapy. I'm joking. But like, yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, yeah lah, I don't know lah. I think I've, if you ask me, I feel angry about it. I feel sad about it. But I don't think it will stop me from doing the work I like to do. All the people who are essential workers, you know, people who work F&B, people who are delivery men, people who work in the, like, you know, healthcare, you know. So you admit that these jobs are essential. These jobs that are so dependent on the body being, a bodily presence being there. But you still don't, I don't see the reflection of change in the value either, right? Like, of their labor. But maybe that's actually a win. You see, these are the most essential things. But so maybe, but I think people are starting to realize how important a lot of these things. But I think actually the resistance is because to change. It's actually because you're unwilling to pay more for what needs to be paid more for, you know. And so you instill fear that you see, if you don't do this job, you'll be replaced by a robot. Actually, if they're replaced by a robot, then maybe they can do their job better. Yeah, and then they can focus on what the robot cannot do. Yeah, but then you know that then you have to pay more for that. And I think that's where the resistance is. At the end of the day, it's the only home I will truly inhabit. And it's the one relationship that is lifelong, you know. And that's actually very beautiful, if you ask me. It's to take the time to... Take the time, I mean, that's all we have. We only have time.
Soma Stories is produced by Artwave Studio in collaboration with Tell Your Children. If you enjoyed listening, continue to support us by leaving a positive review on our listening platform of choice. As always, we've included the relevant links and they can be found on artwave.studio/Soma Stories. In the next episode, we explore the gaze, what it means to see and to be seen. I will be speaking with artist Noor, fashion photographer Jaya Kadir, and Miss Singapore Universe Nandita Bana. Thank you for listening and see you again.